One of the greatest and most unique titles for the N64 was Pokemon Snap. A game where, under the supervision of Professor Oak and his strange obsession with things being in the center of frame, would have you taking pictures of Pokemon as they go about their business in the wild. Or you could just throw apples at all of them, like Snorlax, because he was probably asking for it anyways. Regardless, the game's simple concept mixed with the property of Pokemon that was, at the time, very busy taking over the entire world, made for a fun and unique experience that other games just didn't provide. But did you know that the game started off not as a Pokemon title, but a different game altogether? Today on Gaming Mysteries, we'll be going over the beta of Pokemon Snap. Now, Pokemon Snap began its life as a different game called Jack and the Beanstalk, or Jack and Beans as it's often referred to as. Announced in 1995, the same year the 64DD was announced, the game was said to be a brand new type of video game under the genre of simulation, and was to utilize the features of the N64's disk drive add-on to their fullest extent. The game sounded like Nintendo's own warped view of the story of Jack and the Beanstalk, although that's mostly assumption based on the game's name, and we may never know exactly what this game was. That said, we do know that Nintendo brought in several non-video game related personnel to help work on the project, these people being chosen by Shigesato Itoi of Earthbound fame, Satoru Iwata, Koichi Nakamura, and God himself, Shigeru Miyamoto. Although it's not clear why Nintendo brought these people on board, I suspect since this was a simulation-esque title, Nintendo needed input that they couldn't get from game developers alone. We also know that due to the team's relative inexperience regarding game design, Jack and Beans would see a lot of delays and never really find its direction beyond the idea of exploring areas to take pictures of different creatures, while utilizing the 64DD's features such as its internal clock to presumably incentivize players to play the game at odd hours of the day or night to see how the world would change and find out what different things they could find and photograph. But with endless delays of the 64DD and this title, it was as if it was stuck in a limbo of sorts. In an Iwata Asks in 2010, Iwata can be quoted as saying, originally Pokemon Snap for the Nintendo 64 system wasn't a Pokemon game, but rather a normal game in which you took photos. But the motivation for playing the game wasn't clear. We wondered what players would enjoy taking pictures of, and later on we made a somewhat forced switch to taking pictures of Pokemon. So instead of a game where you took pictures of unknown creatures that were never really shown off, you'd instead photograph the adorable walking money bags known as Pokemon. A change that was met with mixed reactions from those working on the game at the time, with one designer named Masanobu Yamamoto having a negative reaction to the addition of Pokemon as they replaced the characters that he had been working on specifically for Jack and Beans. Though Yamamoto would eventually come around to the idea as, quote, adopting the Pokemon would clarify what we should do and the direction we should head, and I came to like Pokemon, so I felt like that had saved us. It's very likely that had Pokemon not entered the picture, Jack and Beans would have stubbornly continued its slow development up until the release of the 64DD, which wouldn't be until 1999, and even then the release was anemic at best. Pokemon gave the title something it desperately lacked, which was direction, or a purpose. And with this newfound purpose, the game could finally take shape as Pokemon Snap, where you would photograph Pokemon because they're cute, and all the rage, and because an old man told you to. Now, the newly minted Pokemon Snap would still make use of the 64 disk drive, at first anyways, although it would soon follow in the footsteps of all the other games that were going to originally make use of the peripheral, and ditch the 64DD for a standard cartridge release instead, as a means to get the game out quicker. Sadly, this meant any elements involving the internal clock or any 64 disk drive features for that matter, would end up being scrapped, which in one regard is a shame because you know Nintendo was insane enough to release a game that would have you waking up at odd hours of the night to take pictures of Pokemon, which would have made for an interesting game to say the least, but the move to cartridges was ultimately vital if the game was going to see any kind of release at all. And why wait for the 64DD when you can strike while the iron and Pokemon craze is still hot? Although we do have some early beta footage of the game from while it was still a 64DD title, any features the 64DD were bringing to the table was not really visible at this point in time, but it's still an interesting early look at Pokemon Snap, taking place in what appears to be a Hyrule Field-esque area, unless my colorblindness is screwing with me again. I know some have referred to this as a desert, but unless this is really dark sand that looks like grass with bushes and trees that just decided to move to the beach, I'm gonna have to disagree. That said, it's an intriguing level that's nowhere to be found in the final version of Pokemon Snap, though the overall gameplay looks just like the final game, with you being an on-rails photographer while you throw stuff at Pokemon and snap some pictures. Although, at this point in time, the game featured a very different HUD, showing a different roll of film to display how many photos you've taken, and your three main items, those being the Apple, Pester Ball, and Pokeflute, all mapped to supposedly one button, with you able to switch between them on the fly with presumably the D-pad, as opposed to each having its own dedicated button, as A for Apple, B for Pester Ball, and down C for the Pokeflute. I think the final version went with a better method, as sometimes you need to use items right away, like throwing apples right away, and having to switch between them manually as opposed to them having their own dedicated button would make for some potentially clunky gameplay. The viewfinder for the camera utilized a different design at this point in time, which I actually like quite a bit, and the photo album looked drastically different. Some of the Pokemon have different models as well, such as Pikachu, who looked a tad thinner and emotionless / pissed off, as does Squirtle and maybe Bulbasaur, although with this quality of footage it's kinda hard to tell. What this poor quality can't hide though, is Snorlax not simply waking up, but hopping to his feet and beginning to pose for the camera. Never really pictured him as photogenic. Some Pokemon have different animations, with Pidgey on the ground and then taking flight, as opposed to always being airborne in the final version. And Meowth has what can only be described as a ridiculous-ass walk animation, like he's strutting. He also shows off some animations that made their way into the final product, but this walk is really bizarre. What's probably the most noticeable aspect of this trailer is footage of an Ekans, a Pokemon who didn't make it into the final version of the game, but is alive and kicking in this early gameplay. It's hard to say why they didn't include Ekans in the final game. You'd think they'd be able to squeeze at least one more Pokemon in there, and had they done so, the game would have featured 64 Pokemon as opposed to 63, and thus, it would have fit in much better with its N64 comrades. That's more or less it for differences between the early beta footage and the final product, though we're not done quite yet, as the game features an unused track that never made its way into the final game, but was uploaded to the internet by composer Ikuko Mimori, said track that was said to be used in a level that would feature ghost Pokemon that didn't make its way into the final game. It's hard to say exactly why this level was omitted, though, if I had to guess, maybe the team felt limited given the amount of ghost Pokemon they had to work with, that being only 3 in Generation 1. Maybe it was hard to make a spooky level with only 3 Pokemon, which is a shame because it's a pretty good idea for this style of game. Perhaps that's something they could tackle in Pokemon Snap 2, the sequel no one is going to shut up about until Nintendo actually makes the game. So, your move, Nintendo. But that was the beta of Pokemon Snap. While it's always sad to see yet another 64 disk drive related game slowly implode as time marches on, I'm glad Nintendo decided to make the move to cartridge so we could have Pokemon Snap in all its glory. And while it's hardly the most complex title available for the platform, it's sure as hell a lot of fun. Except for Oak and his questionable point system regarding photography. But this has been Gaming Mysteries. Thank you for watching. Hello everyone, Yuri of Wind here, and welcome back to End Slate, closing in on Thanksgiving slate. You just watched the Gaming Mysteries on the beta of Pokemon Snap, which I hope you enjoyed. If you'd like to read up on Jack and the Beanstalk, or Jack and Beans, for yourself, a link in the description will be pointed towards Unseen64, which is a magical website. Although that wasn't my only source, but it's still a magical website. And also, the cutting room floor, which doesn't really have a lot of cutted stuff from Pokemon Snap, but 10 to 1 says you can find a game that has a lot of cutted stuff in it. With that said though, it's time to move on to the business of the day, which is the awkward talking event slate at the end of the video. First thing I'd like to do is recommend the last video I did on this channel in case you didn't see it or don't care about it. But it was an obscure gaming on Mario 3 Around the World for the Sega Genesis, a bootleg from Russia, a bad bootleg from Russia. So if you're interested in that, you can click on the thingy. And there will be 2 other videos which I will have chosen that will be videos that if you click on them, there will be videos and you can watch them because that's how videos work. At the bottom of the screen, Nico does the art. He's currently doing the art also for Peanut Butter Gamer's Zelda Month. So go Nico. Check Nico out on Twitter. Also, I have social media. I don't know. You can check it out if you want. It's not a post about Kamen Rider a lot. Of course, if you like the video and you want to like it or share it, because I think YouTube hasn't been sending my videos out to everyone's subscription box. I don't even know if it's a box anymore. It could be a rectangle, but I don't think they've been doing that. That'd be greatly appreciated, but I'm not going to force you to do it. And then also I have a Patreon, which is allowing me to focus more time on making videos, such as the video I just videoed today. Speaking of Patreon, I would like to thank some lovely folks on the Patreon. Patrons, I believe is the terminology. And so from the bottom of my heart, thank you, Ben Shaw, Darth Penguin, Nikki Batelli, Shulks Minato, Abdul Kareem Torres, Nikki Lehman, Sally from 3 Ice Cube Show, D-Man's Land, Acquisitioner of Ken's Fry Hair, Jacob Sifford, Ryan Macklin, Paul Walker, Tio Santore, Joseph Pueo, Boltron, Chase Holstis, Skyward Keyblade, Joseph Constantine, Nolan, Christina Coleman, Alex Meyer, Doc Drazen, Andrew Arana, Aaron Brewington, David Freesley, Fernando Silva, Rodrigo Derez, Brandon Alexander Cohen, Beautiful Yoshi, Steven Severance, Mitchell Janda, Mitchell, that was a good episode of Mystery Science Theater 2000, Sergio, Peachy, Vinny McCasey, Diego Martinez, Kared Zun, I think I got that, Megamers, Mio Kuroshima, I don't know if you're related to Great Boy and Melon Person, Gisteria, Christoph Perrin, Matt Jones, Jason Fox Cohey, The Retro Raver, Rory Orcaro, Matt Metzimakers, Gordon Freeman, Kenpachi Ramasama, Lori Lon Lon Rancher Smith, Anthony Mang, Squiggly Kip, Crow Feathers, Fat D. Fat D always finding a way to sneak into videos. Hi Fat D, what's up? Alex Rowley, Kelsey Lewinsbury, Jonathan Kleos, Tyler Pardon, Shay Montgomery, Arpai Spies, Joseph Hitsky, Ryan Cole, Erlen Mattis Rees, Jacob Epler, Buying Senpai's Attention, still very good, River Casey, Joel Guzman, and Dark Video Gamer. And of course, anyone else who's donated to the Patreon to allow me to focus more time on videos. This shouldn't be the last video this month. I'm working on at least 2 other ones that I plan on getting up. One for sure next weekend. Maybe one around Thanksgiving, although it's kind of hard to say at this point if I have family stuff going on. So, I don't know. But, again, thank you all very much. And thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoy the videos. Next time on N-Slate, I think I'm doing a Dragon Ball video. So that should be fun. I'll see you guys next time on N-Slate.